This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello, everybody.
Sorry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale, and today I'm going to be talking to film critic Neil Young. And we're talking from the Tromsø International Film Festival, 200 miles above the Arctic Circle. Hi, Neil.
Hi, John. Nice to see you today. Up here in the frozen north. Not so frozen today.
Yeah, I mean, global warming has somewhat spoiled the frozen party.
Yeah, now it's more of a slush fest.
Absolutely.
As they used to call about Sundance, what they call it, slush dance, and I think there's definitely an aspect of that, you know. But apparently the week before the festival, it was freezing cold and blanketed in beautiful white snow, and now it's not. So you have to just enjoy the cinema and enjoy the films instead. Yeah,
the ship that went across from Ireland to New York didn't hit an iceberg. I'm sure that's no consolation.
No, I mean, thankfully the guests do no longer have to come on transatlantic steamers. But
this is a good thing.
But no, if you make your way here, I mean, it is in the middle of, you know, it's, as you say, it's miles above the Arctic Circle. And normally to get here you need at least 2 or sometimes 3 flights. And so it's definitely a bit of a trek, but those who come generally want to be back, and it's my 10th time at the festival, so I've done pretty well for return visits.
What was the first year you came?
The first year I came was 2004, when I was a member of the FIPRESI jury, which is the International Film Critics Union body. And at many festivals they have a small jury, normally 3 people, and this is in parallel to the official juries. And you watch a selection of films which is made by the festival, and then you get they give a FIPRESI prize. So that was my first excuse for visiting Tromsø. And then I was actually on that same jury 2 years ago here, and we gave our prize to Pacifiction by Albert Serra.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you what you're going to give a prize to this year, because that would be...
Well, I'm not on the jury this year, so... Thankfully. No, once every what was it, 19 years. I think that's a good average.
Oh, right. I had this feeling for some reason that you were on more juries than that.
For FIPRESI juries in Tromsø, I've done it twice, 2004 and 2023. But other festivals, yes, obviously I was on a jury in Belgrade in December, you know, so it's, through the year I'll normally do, 2, 3, maybe 4 juries, and, but, you know, at Tromsø, yeah, I just have the 2 so far, so the next one will be, after another 19 years, will be 2042.
2042.
So we'll see, by that point the place will be some sort of tropical paradise with beaches and things like that.
And I'll just be entering my 30s. It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, well, we'll see each other then.
So, what have you seen so far that you've enjoyed?
Well, I'm here mainly to work, so I'm mainly actually watching films, doing introductions and Q&As, and then I'm going to be moderating emceeing the closing ceremony. So I don't have a lot of chance to explore the program, I'm afraid to say. I saw a pretty good Icelandic film this morning called Natatorium, a kind of dark psychological thriller. Which I didn't really know much about. So sometimes it's nice when you get your list of Q&A films and it's films you would not normally select to see. So it's nice to be thrown in at the deep end. I did take the chance to see Nickel Boys by Ramel Ross, which was a film that you selected, but maybe you can explain the background behind that, because it was part of a special selection.
Yeah, that was a critic's pick, which I was delighted to be asked to do. They asked me it's quite late on in the process. I think it was December, and there was a real difficulty as to whether we would get it or not, because obviously you have to talk to the studio and they have to decide whether it fits in with their plans to have it shown at the festival. And we did have, I gave them a list of 3 or 4 films that I thought I would fit the festival and would be great to introduce to an audience. Just today I came back from introducing it just before this interview, and it was pretty full. It was in the largest cinema, I think, in the festival, Focus One. Is that the largest, or is Culture House?
I think the Culture House is bigger, but
right.
but number one is a big room, yeah, and it's a great, lovely big screen. Which for a film like that, maybe not a good idea to sit at the front, since the whole thing is done with first-person subjective camera, and so I think the back row is a good advice for Nickel Boys.
Yeah, I know a lot of people feel a little bit sort of disoriented by that film because of what you say, because of that subjective camera.
Did you prepare the audience and you say, you're not going to see the usual Hollywood-style camera work here?
Exactly, and it is disconcerting, and it is fixing you in a position, and whereas you are given a perspective usually which is godlike, which is omniscient, doesn't need to worry about where walls are or ceilings, and the Stanley Kubrick shot of The Shining seems to be reproduced in every other film now that drones are cheap. But I like that. I like films which distort how we're used to seeing things. I like things that make us uncomfortable and call into question how we look at stuff. I think not every single film has to do that. That's the point.
But it's interesting that film has been successful, and it's probably going to be nominated for some Oscar or something like this. But it's definitely been, a big film of last year, and it's the director that had obviously done a kind of, let's say, a documentary, the first film, a very kind of, not essayistic, but impressionistic documentary.
Yeah.
Let's put it like that.
It's like slightly hybrid.
Yeah, and not exactly a straightforward documentary, but this was his first sort of fictional film, if we can call it that. Although there is documentary elements in it as well, as was it Goddard who said all documentary contains fiction, all fiction contains documentary, and I think this is I think he is a director that is obviously in that lineage. And the fact that it has been accepted and embraced, shows that people are open to that. I mean, I do remember a film called Hardcore Henry, which was about 10 or 12...
Mentioned it in my introduction.
Yeah, 10 or 12 years ago, which was by, was it Bekmambetov? I think it was Timur Bekmambetov, one of his films after he did the Nightwatch trilogy, which was very explicitly a kind of video game aesthetic where it's effectively a first-person shooter camera. And you are continually looking through the eyes of Hardcore Henry. But, I very much enjoyed Hardcore Henry. I think it's a very good film. But obviously Ramel Ross is dealing with issues of racism and American politics and history and things like that. And is approaching it from a much more auteuristic, or one could even say Malikian, angle. And when I saw the film, it was I was like, yep, I can definitely see why John has selected this film, because you're also here in connection with your book on Terrence Malick.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow we're doing a sort of conversation on the book, which is going to be, I'm really looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to hearing, perhaps if we have an opportunity to hear from the audience as well, what people are thinking.
And of course, many of them will. I mean, there's no Malick film showing in the festival. Well, none by Terrence Malick, but again, one could argue that Ramel Ross, now that Terrence Malick is approaching the latter part of his career, maybe
the second half.
Maybe somebody is the fingers are reaching towards the baton to be taken from that, and it's kind of interesting that in a way that Malick is such a huge figure in American cinema and in world cinema. But really, in terms of influence, in terms of people who you can say make Malickian films, maybe because his aesthetic is so distinctive and he's been doing it for so long and so brilliantly, to even approach that, a lot of directors would be very nervous of.
There was a period about 5 years ago where there were a raft of, David Gordon Green made a couple of films. The Ghost Story, the director of that, David Lowery, made a film called All Them Bodies Saints, which was considered a very Badlands influence.
I think we're going actually back more than 10 years with those films.
You're right, actually. You are right.
David Gordon Green 5 years ago was already embarking on his Halloween period.
You're absolutely
right. Not quite so Malickian. I mean, a Malickian Halloween would be something to behold.
Yeah, well, in a violent nature.
Oh, well, which I haven't seen. But yeah, as I say, in terms of, who will carry that standard forward. I mean, Ramel Ross is his own person, and he is doing things in his own way. But I think the debt to Malick, certainly, obviously, something like Tree of Life, the opening of the film of Dickle Boys is very, I think, overtly and unapologetically homaging, shall we say. I mean, what's the phrase? Talent borrows, genius steals. And there's certainly there's nothing wrong with that. A director sort of tipping their cap to a previous master of the form, but then taking it, and certainly the way that Ramel Ross and Nicholas Monsur, who's the editor of the film, the editing is not Malickian at all in the way that it uses these inserts of kind of popular culture or television and things like that, and that's very pushing things much more into experimental cinema, which Malick, you could argue there are certain montages where there are sort of touches of that, but nothing as overt and in your face. I mean, there's a moment in the film, and of course Nickel Boys is a very difficult film to talk about for people who haven't seen it, because part of the point is a series of revelations, but a crucial transition is executed by showing a camera inside a boxcar as it goes through a landscape, which is initially very disorienting because this seems to come from absolutely nowhere. And I think it's maybe my favourite sequence in the film, because it's just so. If that was just a little experimental short film, it would be probably in my top 10 films of the year. So I very much appreciated when he really pushed that experimental side, and I do like it when I mean, to call Nickel Boys a mainstream film is in some ways absurd, but a kind of a narrative film, a feature, it's a narrative fictional film. To incorporate experimental elements can be very dangerous. It can go horribly wrong. But I think whoever is responsible for that, and obviously let's say it was a team effort of Ramel Ross and Nicolas Monsur. I didn't see anybody else credited there. I think there I really felt that I was in the presence of a virtuoso filmmaker.
I think the other connective tissue is Dee Dee Gardner is one of the producers on the film, and she produced Tree of Life as well. I would, just to rewind for 1 second, I think that inserts of sort of contemporary footage, Hidden Life did that quite a bit, where it used a lot of Leni Riefenstahl, used a lot of black and white war footage. And in the original script, it was supposed to start with Tiananmen Square as a sort of example of a hidden, an unknown. Yeah,
but even there, I mean, if it's Hidden Life, which is set in Third Reich period, to have images from Leni Riefenstahl, I mean, in Nickel Boys, a lot of it is connected with moon exploration, which of course is going on at the same time. And I kept thinking of the song by Whitey's on the Moon.
Yeah, Gil Scott Heron, which was used in First Man.
I mean, this could have been put over the end credits. So there, I think in Nickel Boys it's more oblique. I mean, I think a lot of the things in Nickel Boys are very oblique, deliberately so. And whereas Hidden Life for Malick is really arguably his most straightforward film.
Right.
Others have said this, and I think in terms of as a chronological narrative, and the ambiguities there are. I mean, we're dealing with a good person in an evil space and all that kind of thing. And as I say, it has been described as Malick's relatively straightforward film, if such a thing can be said to exist, which perhaps it can't.
I mean, I'm interested. I think you're right as well, saying that struggling with that idea of this Nickel Boys being a sort of conventional narrative film, because I did get the impression when I was watching it that because this film is an adaptation of a literary work by Colson Whitehead, because it's based on a true story which has been deeply researched but isn't widely known. And it has that sort of what in Italian we would call buonismo, that it just ticks boxes of what the Academy likes. A tale of racial injustice, inspiring and emotional, and trauma somehow coming through at the end. You sort of can imagine a conversation in the production office prior to going into filming, saying, "Look, if we use what you're saying we use, we're not going to win an Oscar. But if we just tell it as a conventional movie, we're really in with a good shot." Now, that might never have happened. It probably didn't. And it might be also the case that the Nickel Boys picks up a whole raft of nominations, because we're recording this before the nominations have been announced. But it does strike me as a brave decision. It strikes me as like this film nobody would have complained if this film had been conventional. They would have,
I think Colson Whitehead would have complained.
Right. Okay.
And his most famous book is The Underground Railroad,
right,
which was adapted by Barry Jenkins as a
Amazon television
as a TV thing. And again, Nickel Boys could obviously have gone that route. And I haven't seen Barry Jenkins' version, but again, it's kind of, the film that Nickel Boys has been compared with is Moonlight, because, you're dealing with characters over a period of time, and there is this kind of artistic element to the film, and it's an ambitious film in many ways. It won Best Picture. And Ramel Ross's Hale County this evening, I think I'm getting the title right, was nominated for Best Documentary, Best Feature Documentary. So these things, as the Academy kind of becomes more diverse and more open to these kinds of films, I mean, I don't think Hale County would have been nominated 15 years ago. And a film like Moonlight did expand the kind of Overton window of what could be considered that kind of a film. And Nickel Boys, I mean, I'm sure the director has said this, kind of goes through the door that Moonlight kind of opened. And then, of course, we're talking about a lineage of black filmmakers going back to Charles Burnett and the LA Rebellion and things like that. So it is a continuum which goes back, for decades. Let's go back to Oscar Michaud, it's more than 100 years. But in terms of those films getting the exposure and getting people talking about them and not being a niche side thing, which is, it has to be discovered. I mean, I'm sure Nickel Boys will play in regular cinemas, and I think it will get a reasonable amount of coverage. But it is the kind of film where some people, I mean, I was at the screening yesterday and there were people leaving. And I think, not a lot, but, in front of me there was several. And I think one of the problems was the dialogue. That it wasn't so much that the first person camera was an issue, it was that there was no subtitles. A lot of the dialogue was deliberately sort of low in the mix. You couldn't quite hear what they were saying. The regional accents that were being heard. And I could just sense the frustration that, like, people really wanted to know what was being said. And I was speaking to a British film critic last night, and they said that they actually put the subtitles on to get this. I mean, I remember when The Wire was first shown on television, a lot of people said British people said we just don't know what they're saying, and so they would put the CFAX subtitles on, the teletext subtitles. So again, I mean, I think it is a film where ideally you read the book, you see the film, you're able to either understand all the dialogue or you use subtitles. So it is a film that requires work. But as always, as we say as critics, all of your efforts will be rewarded, and the more you work, the more you will be engaged with the film. And it's not a film that you can be passive about. I mean, it does require engagement and attention and as I say, a bit of work, which is for some audience, they don't want to work when they go to the cinema. That's the last thing they want to do.
And I think maybe we should sort of promote the idea of not understanding everything, and promote that if you're confused, that might well be the artist's intention, and you should kind of relax into that confusion. All will be revealed.
I mean, ambiguity is if art doesn't have ambiguity, is it art? And I remember when The Tree of Life was released in Sunderland, which is where I'm from, in the northeast of England, which is working class industrial town, and it was in the multiplex cinema. Sean Penn, Brad Pitt in The Tree of Life. Come and see it. And then after a few days, a notice appeared on the top of the box office thing saying refunds will only be given in the first half hour, because people went along to see The Tree of Life, and of course it takes, 45 minutes before we get a human, or, it's a montage of dinosaurs, and think people were coming out saying, where's Brad Pitt, where's Sean Penn? So, and that was 15 years ago. I suspect, I don't know if Nickel Boys would be a huge hit in Sunderland. But you never know. Let's give it a go. I mean, I was amazed, kind of surprised to see that Queer was on in my local multiplex in Sunderland. I mean, the Daniel Craig effect, shall we say. But I thought I'd have to go to Newcastle to the art cinema to watch that, and there it was in the Omniplex in Sunderland. So
Luca Guadagnino.
Yeah, Challengers obviously was a widely liked film among younger people. I mean, Queer. I mean, I think the target audience for that was not the same. I think there's not a huge overlap between Zendaya and Daniel Craig admirers. Maybe there is. But I was kind of heartened by the fact that it was, at least they give it a go. And I went to see it in Sunderland, and there was about 20, 30 people in the afternoon. So I was like, well, there we are.
Well, some people there, yeah.
There is positive good, any good news about cinema, anything about people going to the cinema, anything that gets people into the cinema, I don't mind what it is. Wicked, I think, it's not a film that I would go and see, but it's getting people into the cinema, and it's keeping the cinemas going, and when they go in there, they might be intrigued to go. Nosferatu. Who would have thought Nosferatu in 2024, 2025 would be one of the biggest box office hits in the post-Christmas period? I'm not personally a big fan of the film, but I'm very, very happy that people are going to see that and are experiencing Eggers, which, he's an interesting filmmaker, but he's obviously not at the level of like Ramel Ross in terms of his ambition and even his execution, I would say. They're both arguably kind of humorless filmmakers, but that's about the only thing that I'll put together with them.
I think Willem Dafoe's pipe can't help but raise a chuckle.
Well, in the Lighthouse, I think shows that Eggers, I think he has a comic gift, which I think he's not happy about having. And it's a bit like Brad Pitt. It took Brad Pitt a long time to realise that he was actually had a brilliant comic talent.
Yeah,
it took the Coen brothers to get him to appreciate that.
I was going to say I rewatched Burn After Reading recently, and that's always seemed to me sort of like a second tier Coen brothers movie. And rewatching it, it was like, no, this is absolutely top tier. There's
and a film about Washington DC politics. I mean, I think it was
very shortly after 9/11.
Yeah, and very much looking forward to what came later. And no, it's a film I've always enjoyed. And I think I'm right in saying they were writing it when they were shooting No Country for Old Men, which was obviously a very heavy, I mean, if not entirely a humorless film, but, a much heavier enterprise. And Burn After Reading was them kind of blowing off gas and blowing off steam and having fun writing this kind of, screwball Preston Sturges thing. I mean, of the two films, I'd much rather watch Burn After Reading than No Country for Old Men. I mean, but that was the one that got them the Oscar. That was the one that was huge box office.
It's weird. That's such a weird film, No Country for Old Men, because that film kind of, to me, is almost not a Coen Brothers film. I mean, the script is practically identical to the novel. The way it's shot feels to me very reserved for them and very beautiful, but you can imagine them just really giving Roger Deakins his head and, you can shoot this for us, Roger. We know you can make this look as beautiful as possible. And it just feels like it doesn't feel like a Coen Brothers film. To even the humour is more Cormac McCarthy and Tommy Lee Jones than it is a natural. I mean, I know they've done that Southern Gothic before with Blood Simple, that sort of Southern noirish,
and The Lady Killers is very explicitly a Southern film.
Yeah, that's my least favourite. Do I need to rewatch that? Is that
I think you do. I think you do. I think it's one of my favourites.
Just for the listeners, me and Neil, we argue constantly and consistently about films, and we don't have the same taste, I don't think.
No, it's a bit of a solar eclipse if we both agree on the same film. So that's always, it's about the broken clock. It has to happen occasionally, but it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah. But no, I mean, The Lady Killers, I know I'm in a minority on that one. I saw it at a press screening, I don't know, whenever it came out, 20 years ago. And the people were laughing their heads off all the way through this film, and I was one of them. And we were almost literally rolling in the aisles. And then I read the reviews of those critics, and they were like, how dare the Coen brothers touch this British classic film. And,
that's not my problem with it. My problem has nothing to do with the source material, or, I'm not even that, I mean, I've seen The Lady Killers, of course, but it's not like it's some sort of treasured, untouchable classic for me. I mean, it's a very good Ealing comedy, but no, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the film wasn't funny, didn't work.
I mean, if you didn't laugh at it, then it didn't work for you.
Yeah.
But as I say, maybe it helped that I was in a room with 200 critics who were laughing themselves senseless.
Right.
And as I say, if a comedy makes me laugh as much as The Lady Killers does, whether it's a fact that I'm surrounded by people and laughter is infectious, I don't know what it is. But I came out of that cinema on a cloud of happiness, and my review reflected that. And I was sort of stunned when I read the other reviews, and the laughter seemed to have evaporated in their throats.
That's exactly how I felt when I left the cinema after Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me, which I thought was hilarious in the cinema, and then afterwards everyone was slagging it off.
Well, I mean, this is one of the things why critics should always immediately rush off to a dark room and just write their review.
Without talking to
anybody. But as I say, if you've been surrounded by people who've either been laughing with a film or laughing at a film, I mean, the film that I remember being laughed at was one of my very rare visits to Cannes Film Festival, and it was the first ever screening of Only God Forgives of Nicholas Winding Refn, which is...
Oh, that was the first thing in the morning.
Yeah, not a film that invites, that has a huge amount of humour in it, and the giggles of certain critics within minutes of the film starting basically rendered it very hard to take that film seriously. And, I've got to say I shared their derision for that film. I thought it was a bit unprofessional of them to be giggling quite so much at the first press screening in Cannes, but there we are. I was a new kid on the Cannes block. in those days. But no, as I say, and also the thing that the original script of The Lady Killers, the guy who wrote the script was from the Deep South. He was from somewhere, I think, well, not the Deep South, but certainly at least St. Louis. I mean, somewhere in the south of America. And to transplant that to that part of the world, I thought was a perfectly valid and very and I think the Coen brothers, you know, when you say that No Country for Old Men isn't very Coen-y, which it isn't, but I think they're always looking to sort of stretch themselves.
Yeah, oh no.
And as opposed to somebody like Wes Anderson, who is very happy and he has his niche and God bless him and people go and see it and you know, I'm very happy that Wes Anderson exists in the world. But of course, you know, Wes Anderson himself knows that he basically found a way to make his films and keeps making them, and there we are. And he'll keep doing that until the day he dies. And the Coen brothers, a bit like, I would say probably like Steven Soderbergh, and of course they both edit and shoot their own films under pseudonyms. And, you know, Soderbergh loves the fact that people say he doesn't have a consistent style and what is a Steven Soderbergh film. So I think the Coen brothers, because they get associated with a certain kind of humour, they were very keen to bust out of that, and getting hold of Cormac McCarthy's novel. I mean, what a collision of sensibilities that is. And as I say, you know, personally, it's not one of my favourite Coen Brothers films or even Cormac McCarthy films, but it won Best Picture at the Oscars, and it was their biggest box office success. And Anton Chigurh has entered the pantheon alongside Hannibal Lecter. So, you know, I mean, I think that's all wonderful. And the fact that the Coen Brothers have had, you know, because again, it's easy to forget that the Coen brothers didn't have hits. I mean, like the Hudsucker Proxy was a
disaster.
Yeah, I mean, it was a Tim Robbins and Tim Roby.
No, Tim Roby includes it in his book Box Office Poison as one of the. I mean, it was a real disaster. I mean, 90 odd million was spent on it, and it was.
I mean, Miller's Crossing, which I just rewatched, which is now kind of venerated as a pantheonic gangster film, didn't make money. You know, the Coen brothers they always got the critics and they never made a penny.
Barton Fink.
Yeah, Barton Fink, you know, I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of money here, as somebody said in Inside Llewyn Davis or whatever the quote is. So, you know,
F. Murray Abrams.
Yeah, at a certain point they turn the corner and they start having hits. I mean, True Grit, people, you know, was a huge hit. You know, I mean, but also Jeff Bridges had never been a box office guy. And when you say that to people now, and you say for decades, Jeff Bridges was kind of box office poison, and it famously never, I mean, Seabiscuit was kind of his first film that really, I mean, obviously he had been in films that made money, like King Kong and Jagged Edge, but they weren't, you know, whenever you put Jeff Bridges front and centre in a film, the audience just didn't want to know.
Starman with John Carpenter.
No, it was, I mean, it was okay, it wasn't a turkey, it wasn't, you know, but if you wanted to cast, he was a bit like Kurt Russell. They were never seen as box office leading men.
Yeah, sort of second string.
Yeah. And as I say now, they're these beloved veterans who people presume were like striding Hollywood, like, you know, Burt Reynolds was the big box office star of
Burt Reynolds and Clint were the two.
You know, I mean, and the Americans always had these lists of the top 10 box office stars, and Burt Reynolds was number one for a decade.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Jeff Bridges would never have got anywhere near that list. So, as I say, the perception now that the Coen brothers are sort of established and they've been around for so long, and I think maybe Fargo was again, and that was a big turning point for them.
Absolutely.
In terms of like they finally broke out of this kind of coterie, you know, critics' favourites, and actually connected with audiences. And the number of people, when I say, "Oh, what do you do? I'm a film critic. What's your favourite film?" and we talk about that, and I'll say, "What's your favourite film?" and if they sort of think, I'll say, "Is it Fargo?" How did you know? You know, and it's amazing how many people that is literally their favourite film of all time. So
it's got a sort of Godfather Part 2-ness to it.
Yeah, I mean, the other one is Shawshank Redemption, which that's another story.
It's a totally solid film. I've just never.
Well, I think it touches people on an emotional level. I mean, that was one of my problems with Nickel Boys, that I can appreciate the art, and I can appreciate the craft, and I can appreciate the ambition, and I love the fact that the experimental stuff and but I never connected with the characters. I just didn't really care. You know, I mean, one can sympathise, and one can, as I say, appreciate the horror of what you're seeing there. But at no point in that film did I feel as though I was being carried along by the film. It's
so paradoxical that actually you're sort of being put in their heads, and at the same time that works as a distancing device rather than a. You would imagine that by sharing their perspective, you would be able to feel for them much more, but in fact, because you can't really see them,
and also the voices become disembodied.
Yeah,
and I think that was one of my issues with the film. is that the audio track, it takes you out of the subjectivity because it has music.
Right.
And so you're watching through somebody's eyes, you're seeing the world through their eyes with a musical soundtrack. I think the music's actually very good. But the fact that the music even exists, and the fact that when you're looking through the character's eyes, the voice is necessarily hollow because of where it's coming from. Again, one is always. I feel that I was always kind of aware of that. And again, there were distancing elements in the film. I mean, Brecht would say, "Great." But to me, when I'm watching a film like that, when I'm sitting in the dark for 2.5 hours, appreciating and admiring and respecting a film only gets me so far. I need to have an emotional connection somewhere. I need to feel something. And that was the problem that I had with Nickel Boys. I kind of came out of it, I was like, well, that was 2015, and I'm very happy to be in the world of Rommel Ross for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I think it's fantastic that the film exists. Would I recommend that film? No. That's that.
Would you pick it for Tromsø Film Festival?
No, but I'm very happy you did, because that's where I saw it. But as I say, when people always say to me, "Oh, should I watch this? Should I watch that? Should I watch Nosferatu? Should I watch this and the other?" And I'll say, well, you might like it. I can't personally recommend it.
Right.
There are certain films. My mother will always say, "Oh, what about this?" I say, "You wouldn't like it." And she was like, "You don't know." I said, "I know you would not like it." She wouldn't like Nosferatu. Right. I mean, my mother loves horror films. She'll go, the more violent, the better. In fact, it's not violent enough for my mother.
Right.
But I would say to her, "No, you wouldn't like Nosferatu."
What's her favourite horror film?
My mother's favourite horror film. She'd probably like. The Birds would be the one that she found the most horrific.
Okay.
Because she has a problem with birds and cats.
Right. Okay.
So any horror film where cats are leaping out onto people and cats are clawing out people's eyes, she would. I mean, my mother would never. The idea of my mother getting disturbed at a film is hilarious. But whenever I would watch horror films with her and cats and birds were flying around or jumping on people, so that I could see that she was not
happy.
Not in the happy place.
No.
But as I say, no. I mean, to me, it's about recommendation, and it's about and I only recommend. Of course, there are certain friends who you think, oh, that person they're going to love this.
Yeah, that's
even though I didn't.
Right.
But I always imagine a kind of like this imaginary friend in Sunderland who says, oh, what about this new film? And should I go and see it? And I either go. Or I'm like, yeah.
It was so funny because I was talking to a friend of mine in England and they were saying, Baby Girl is on at the moment, I'm going to skip that. And I was like, no, you should really go and see it. And they were like, really? Because it looks like, and they described it as 3 Shades of Grey. And I was like, no, and they said they're selling it as an erotic drama.
And I haven't seen the film, but the trailer certainly suggests that. I mean,
it really isn't.
Right.
I mean, for me, it's a full-on satire. It's a full-on comedy of sexual manners, and it's as the best comedies of those sorts are. It's about how those things that you're so comfortable thinking have changed, and I think it's. I love Nicole Kidman. I love late-stage Nicole Kidman. This is a real brilliant performance. I love the actor...
Harris Dickinson.
I think he does...
The versatile Harris Dickinson.
Does a wonderful performance in this. And he really... This dances around sort of dangerous topics and topics that our sort of new Puritanism would just rather avoid, perhaps with a laudable idea of not wanting to offend anybody or not wanting to trigger anybody or whatever. It's like specifically American film has sort of decided, okay, maybe we should just not go there,
Leave it to those European directors who
precisely.
Can
this is indeed directed by a European director.
Yeah, and of course, starring an Australian, a Brit, and a Spanish.
In fact, one of the things about this is like Nicole Kidman being married to Antonio Banderas and not being satisfied is in itself.
So we're kind of in the sci-fi territory.
Exactly. That.
I mean, Harris Dickinson put him. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people would consider Harris Dickinson to be an amazing heartthrob, but I mean, put the two of them together, and there we are. But when you're watching Lady Bird. Baby Girl, did you feel you needed an emotional connection? Or is the film not about emotional connection?
I think it's not. I think there's a difference between emotional connection where I feel I have to like or recognize myself in the film. But or just emotional connection, just in the sense that I could just share that emotion. It doesn't have to be that I necessarily empathise with that person. Or so I saw a film today, which is a really good test case for this emotional connection point that you're bringing up, which is Hard Truths by Mike Leigh.
You saw it just today?
Just today.
Oh.
Okay. So I think it's been around since what? Was it shown at London?
Oh, well, it debuted in Cannes, didn't it? Oh, sorry, no, it was Venice. Oh, no, it wasn't. It got turned down by both of those festivals.
Yeah.
Where did it premiere? Toronto.
Toronto.
Just wasn't good enough for Cannes and Venice. Sorry, Mike Leigh. Just try a bit harder next time. Maybe you'll get into these
I thought it was one of his stronger films. I thought it's actually one of his, that sounds like I'm saying he's made loads of weak films recently. He hasn't. That's the...
I mean, of course, one of your earlier books was about Peter Lou.
Well, yeah, Peter Lou. I must admit, I wasn't able to look at that in an unbiased way because he stole.
Yeah, he didn't get in touch with you to be the consultant.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I sent the novel to the production office when I heard they were doing it and got no reply. Oh. And then it starts in a very similar way. I'm not going to say anything else because otherwise I'm getting into legally choppy waters. Yeah. But this is a film which is extremely demanding of your patience when it comes to the lead character, the protagonist, who is this woman called Pansy, wonderfully performed by
Marianne Jean-Baptiste.
Yes, I was going to say that. I don't know why you jumped in there. Who, of course, was played in Secrets and Lies as well, so it's a sort of them coming back together. One of the amazing things this film does actually is it has a portrait of the black community, which is rich and nuanced, and they're sort of middle class. Her sister is a hairdresser, her husband is a plumber, so you don't have any of those cliches of they live in suburbia. And yet they maintain sort of their own legacy, their own culture. That is really, really well. And you just knowing how Mike Leigh sort of approaches the film with a very actor-centric creative process, it feels very genuine. It doesn't feel like, what does this white guy know about just the way they're using...
the whole milieu is I think very... I mean, there is a sense of a community, and I was talking about to somebody like last night, that the film does have these sort of digressions into the supporting characters, let's call them. The nieces, that we see scenes with them, and then we see scenes with the son, and this kind of novelistic way, that you sense that there is a world beyond here, and obviously you have this gigantic kind of black hole is the wrong way of saying it, but like a centre of gravity in the film, which is Pansy, which kind of dominates everybody because she has severe mental issues. I mean, she's having problems with her life, which affects everybody around her. But of course, by putting it in the context of a very believable social milieu, and those characters and those performances are, and I don't use the word pejoratively, smaller. The performance by Jean-Baptiste is huge. I mean, it's like something from, Hedda Gabler. I mean, it's like one of the
woman
great
under an influence. So
it's you get these great roles in cinema and theatre sometimes, but the crucial thing is you can't just have this one person as a storm. It's how does the storm affect those around her? And Michelle Austin, who plays the sister, and all very well cast, very well observed. And so, everybody is talking about Marianne Jean-Baptiste with reason, but that's not what Mike Leigh's about. I mean, he's always done this. If you go back to Abigail's Party, you have Beverly played by the great Alison Steadman, and Naked Johnny played by David Thewlis. Even in an ensemble, there is normally one sort of big figure that everything is going around. I mean, Happy Go Lucky was an interesting one where you had this very positive character in the middle of the film. who was radiating happiness and warmth.
Almost like a critique of the critics.
Exactly.
Okay,
and so Mike Leigh was showing, I can do this. And, I always remember that the title of the film in France was Be Happy. So, Be Unhappy would be the title for Hard Truths. It's actually, in France it's called Two Sisters, Deux Sœurs, which is like, come and see this. I don't know what they think it's going to do at the box office, but, my favourite scene in the film is the scene with the dentist. And I think the actress who plays the dentist is really terrific. Talk about supporting performances. She's in the film for about 2 minutes.
There's a scene in the supermarket as well, which has like 3 actresses who are they're just people in a supermarket, and they're amazing. Sorry, go on.
But what I loved about it was it's this very British thing where if you actually read what the dentist is saying, it just sounds like she's having a normal civil conversation. But the way that she says it is so loaded with kind of like, I'm being polite to you, but in fact I'm being, I'm standing up to you. Yeah. And the dentist is really one of the very few people who does stand up to her. And the way that it's done, it is, I think it's hilariously funny. And it's also brilliant about British social interactions, because I don't think, I live in Austria and I just don't think people, that's not the way that, it's something so British about it. And Mike Leigh, of course, is brilliant at those British things. The fact that they can get picked up on around the world is fantastic. But I think, it's a bit like watching a Joanna Hogg film. When you see Joanna Hogg and Mike Leigh, they are able to capture those tiny little nuances, which if you start to explain them, and to explain why it's funny, and to explain what they're actually saying beneath this veneer. Pansy is, of course, not polite at all, but the dentist is retaining this kind of desperate veneer of politeness within which she's kind of furious with this patient from hell. And that was the scene where I really felt it took off. The rest of it, I never quite felt that. I was always kind of aware of what the film was doing, and again, I can appreciate the film. It wasn't one of my favourites of last year, and I preferred Peterloo, and I much preferred Mr. Turner. So of
Mr. Turner is perhaps one of his, but I almost want to separate Mike Leigh's work into his sort of contemporary and his period pieces.
Oh yeah, you have to put this alongside All or Nothing, and films like that, and Another Year, and those kind of contemporary.
Another Year, which is also a sort of happy-go-lucky film, because it's also very, very positive and very, Mike Leigh, I think, gets painted with a brush which is all too blue. He can do the whole emotional spectrum.
And I think I think Mike Leigh's one of those people who does read his own reviews,
right?
And he is. I think he's very aware of his position. And again, people now, Mike Leigh is this kind of global national treasure who everybody reveres. For years,
except in England.
Yeah, but for many years in England, he was looked at sort of askance because he was a middle class person who was making films about working class characters. And there was this whole thing about Mike Leigh as a condescending, it's patronising, it's caricature. And a lot of people for many, many years, I think it was Secrets and Lies, when Secrets and Lies won the Palme d'Or and got nominated for the Oscar with Brenda Blethyn and Marianne Jean-Baptiste, at that point he kind of crossed over to this sort of Alan Bennett level of being generally... of course there are always going to be a few people who don't dig him.
He was sort of lumped with Ken Loach as well, and I always thought he was... I love Ken Loach, but he was they're doing very different things.
Yeah, they emerged around the sort of same time. They both have names of 5 letters beginning with L and ending in H with one syllable first names, who make films about kind of the northern or working class or this kind of thing. So, but it's the laziest thing. It's like now we do the same with Andrea Arnold and Lynn Ramsey.
Yeah, that absolutely.
When you say one, the other one is joined to them, and you watch them, and they're like chalk and cheese. So, and again, Mike Leigh and Ken Loach have been around for long enough to be able to look at that and they just have to laugh about it because in a way. Look at the two of them. They're both in their 80s, well into their 80s. They're still, Ken is officially retired now. But, it's done all right for them that the fact that people always bracket them together. And in a way, the two of them, I think they probably had like a friendly rivalry in a strange way. They both came from TV originally and developed through that and things like that. So in a way, it must be annoying. But on the other hand, I think they are big enough artists to be able to sort of look at each other and slap. And maybe they go off for boozy lunches together and compare notes about these sorts of
Oh,
things.
I really hope so. That would be a lunch I would like to go
And then they
to.
see Ridley Scott in the distance and beckon him over. But
Yeah,
that's-
with a
and there's Stephen Frears. Stephen, do join us.
and enters the restaurant in his Rolls Royce in his helicopter. Another film I saw last night, I wouldn't mind your opinion on it if you've seen it, because I don't know if you had the opportunity, but it's Kneecap, which
I did not.
A lot of people have recommended.
Yeah,
to
I was
me.
very annoyed about not being able to see Kneecap because it's obviously such a big film. I mean, it got like 17 nominations in the Irish Academy Awards and like BAFTA nominations all over the place. And I finished a Q&A exactly at 9:00.
Right.
And I was going to run along to the cinema to catch it, and then I bumped into somebody, and in the end I couldn't. And I thought it's probably not a film to miss the beginning of, you know. But I heard that the cinema was kind of a rocking joint, and everybody was into it and all that kind of thing. But is it? I don't know. When I look at it, is it like it seems to be sort of the Commitments meets, I don't know, Take It or Leave It by, you know, the Madness film. I mean, is it that kind of vibe?
Well, to begin with, I was kind of surprised. I thought it was going to be some sort of documentary or mockumentary, because I knew it was kind of like a biopic of the band. And I was kind of thrown because one of the members of the band, he's like an older character.
The one who wears the balaclava,
The one who wears
so you don't see that he looks like old enough to be the other two's father.
Exactly, and he is and he's wearing the balaclava because he's actually a music teacher, and so he's got a reputation to. He doesn't want to be seen with these two drug dealers, essentially. And I was watching the whole film, thinking, "Well, that's an actor. I've seen that guy in loads of stuff." And then when the film finished, and I looked on Wikipedia, it was like, "No, that guy's the guy in the band, and they're all the guys in the band." And one thing that I think is very good about it, the film is massively entertaining. It's very, very funny. It's all over the shop when it comes to politics and tone.
But is there a story?
There's a story,
right.
And it's sort of the rise of the band.
Yeah, so it's like, so we had Slade in Flame, and we had Take It or Leave It.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure there are other examples of this kind of, the band play themselves in...
Hard Day's Night. And,
yeah. In a kind of, in an amusing variation of their rise.
And it's kind of madcap, and it's kind of train spotting, and it is making, it's making a lot of points about, it says right at the very start, any film that's about Belfast starts like this, and cars exploding and sort of riot gear.
Apart from the film Belfast.
Which
begins with travelogue.
This is what I was sort of thinking about in terms of, I was thinking about Kenneth Branagh's Belfast, which was a film I cordially hated.
Wow, well, there we are. The clocks have stopped at the same place. We finally we have found a film that we agree on.
The sun has
I at one point in watching Belfast, when you get the music from High Noon and the battle scene, I literally in the cinema hid my head in embarrassment. I had to hide my face. I was like, please, no. And again, I kind of stumbled out of the cinema into the daylight, kind of like, what on earth was that? And of course, it wins the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay.
I think Branagh, I mean, I don't like talking badly of people, but he is like the celebrity novelist. He's like the quiz show host who's become a novelist. When it comes to directing films, I just think he's a really ropey director.
I mean, as people have said since day one, Branagh with Shakespeare, fine. Branagh without Shakespeare, we have a problem.
Yeah. It's a little bit like Colin Farrell with an American accent.
And as he's always said, everything that he's been doing, Death on the Nile and all that kind of thing, he's trying to build a war chest to make King Lear. So all of this stuff, and what did he do? He did a Jack Ryan film. He did Sleeping Beauty. He's doing... I mean, what on earth is this King Lear going to be? It's going to be like Avatar multiplied by...
I just don't think that's how films work, unless it wants to do Megalopolis. I don't think... I think you're usually about... cinemas won't show films unless they think that people are going to come and see it. It's not... You can't just, build it and they will come.
But maybe that's the point. Maybe he gets so much money in his bank that it doesn't matter. It becomes a megalopolis, and if people go and see it, then fine. And if they don't, then
but how much distribution is he going to get if they could be using that screen to show something which will be full rather than.
But I mean, who's to say what's around the corner? If Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is 5 hours long. And it becomes the biggest box office hit of all time, And then that shifts the window again, and through that could come the sine qua non of Shakespeare adaptations, courtesy of Kenneth Branagh. But as I say, it's
I honestly don't even think his Shakespeare is that good.
We're having to put up with a lot of paydays, and he's Tenet and all these kind of things, and Belfast, which was done in a break.
It was in COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were doing some other film, and then they just had some months to spare, so they went off to a hangar in the home counties and shot Belfast. But yeah, apparently there is a long-term game plan from Kenneth Branagh. But how did we get on to Kenneth Branagh?
Because he
Belfast, the kneecap.
Because strangely, there are moments, although it's got this sort of like rough around the edges. It has the lyrics because it's Irish rap, Gaelic language. So instead of just having subtitles, the sort of lyrics are sort of get scrawled and written on the screen in various points, and it's very MTV in that sense. There is, despite drug use and sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all the rest of it. But there's also is this kind of Belfasty sentimentality about whatever you do, don't anger a mother from West Belfast, a force to be reckoned with. And
are we going towards Mrs. Brown's Boys territory?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a bit where I was sort of thinking this has kind of got this sticky sweet core to it, which isn't necessarily a criticism. It's just it's not as raw as.
But having listened to Kneecap's music, because it's obviously been a buzz thing and people are going on about it, I was like, that's their music. This is what they do. This is like this edgy band, and I'm like, this is like fairly limp rap, I would say. I mean, from not that I'm Mr. Expert on rap, but when I heard that, I was like, no wonder they're getting sort of mainstream attention, because it's really not.
Very mainstream.
I mean, the fact that they're rapping in Gaelic, fantastic. But and apparently live they blow the roof off of the venue, and it's all marvelous. But again, the music itself. I mean, okay, Slade in Flame and Madness and all that kind of thing. Is the music? Does the music justify this treatment, or is it the cultural phenomenon of Kneecap is what is being celebrated?
This is the thing that when I first heard about this, Kneecap was shown, I think, at Sundance, and so I heard from it. I heard about it from Wendy I, and maybe it was showing as well at Cannes as one of those, how they often show in a sidebar something that's done well. And she was like, this is a lot of fun, go and see it if you have the opportunity, and I didn't. But then various people who had been watching it through the years, as the year progressed, and I heard this increasing buzz of how good this film is, how funny it is and everything. And somebody about a month ago said, by the way, has anybody actually listened to the music independently of watching the film? And so I think the music was very much a Northern Irish, a definitely regionally specific.
I mean, they wouldn't be the first band in the world where you need to see them live in order to get it.
Yeah.
And what they put on record is whatever it is.
And frankly, it's rap. So if it's rap and it's in Gaelic, you're not going to sit down with the lyrics, the translation, and get it. So if you're not a Gaelic speaker, and there's a point in the film where someone says there are more people speaking Polish in Belfast than Gaelic, it's got a fairly small catchment area.
I mean, the rapper that I've discovered recently is Jack Zebra, who's from Chengdu. And he raps in this kind of mumbled drone, talking about mumbling in Nickel Boys, and that's part of the point, is that it's just an indecipherable. He's rapping in Mandarin, Chinese, but even for Chinese people, they can't really hear what he's saying. And to everybody else, it's just a kind of vibe, and there is some kind of vocal, and in theory you can decipher it and all that kind of thing. And it runs for all of his songs run for about 2 minutes. And I saw somebody doing a reaction video to one, and they said, this is what old people think all rap is like.
Right.
There's just this kind of like mumbled drone. But I think Jack Zebra is kind of like a phenomenon. I mean, I think he's genuinely brilliant. I think he's one of the best young musicians that I've encountered for years, and so maybe Jack Zebra will do the rise of Jack Zebra. Maybe Rich Pepiot, who is, I think, the British director who's done, I think he's British, isn't he? He's done, I mean, of course, Kneecap are also British because they're from Northern Ireland, but let's not get into that one.
They're from the north of Ireland.
Right, okay. I will not be going into that
my mum is from the north of Ireland as well, so...
Right, yes. But let's say Mr. Pepiot is an English director.
Okay.
And leave it at that. So, but as was Alan Parker, and remember when The Commitments was this giant thing.
Which was set in Dublin.
Which is set in Dublin, and the huge, success that the band then had touring after that and beforehand. I mean, of course, the band was created for the film.
Yeah, and the band but it was kind of funny because it reminded me more, we were mentioning music films earlier. I think the thing with something like The Commitments was much more like the Blues Brothers band, where it doesn't pre-exist the film. The Blues Brothers was a sketch, and then they put together a band of famous musicians in order to make the movie, and then that continued on for a few concerts.
And then there were two different bands of The Commitments that toured, because there was Andrew Scott, the main singer.
Yeah.
And then there was a musical differences, and then you had two separate touring bands.
The Real Commitments and the True Commitments.
For many, many years. So,
there's several versions of the Four Seasons.
But when was the last time you saw or heard of anybody watching The Commitments? I mean, it was like, a big film at the time, and, it's got into a bit of a cultural...
Alan Parker has had a career that I think was hugely important in the 80s and 90s, and yet kind of and I think somewhat unfairly. I think...
as somebody once said about somebody else, he fell out of fashion with a bang.
He
was really...
I mean, Angel Heart is one of my favourite films. I just think it's an amazing noir.
Well, Angel Heart was actually one of the films that kind of made me who I am. I was 16 when it came out, and it was on at the Tyneside Cinema. Never played in Sunderland. It only played at the Art Cinema in Newcastle, so I had to go through there to see it. And it was on for about 6 weeks, and I went to see it at least 4 or 5 times.
Right.
And whatever you think about the film, it's a very directed film. It's like when people watch Raging Bull or Goodfellas. You can sort of that's what a director does. Okay. And Angel Heart, I mean, it's not a subtle film, but to somebody who is just sort of getting into film in a sort of more serious way, to be able to go and see that every day if you wanted to go and see it on 35mm in a nice theatre. And it probably was it. I mean, it was never my favourite film, because my favourite film was always Don't Look Now at that point, which again is a very directed,
hugely directed,
very directed and very edited film.
I just watched it before I came over.
I mean, in fact, the two films have kind of a lot of similarities in a strange way. So I can see what I was certainly drawn to. But yeah, I mean, but now, of course, if you say one of my favourite films of that era is an Alan Parker film, I mean, Mississippi Burning, again, will be a fascinating film, the discourse, as we would now say, around that film, and especially if you talk to black filmmakers and black audiences and black people, and how that film is now seen, as opposed to at the time where it was like, Alan Parker is tackling racism, and we got this great film and it's really putting the thing, and like now it's kind of seen as a bizarre curio.
Yeah, why would you have the FBI as the people who rescued the civil rights?
The heroic FBI. Or even a film like Midnight Express, which again, Alan Parker directed Fame, Birdie. I mean, but now, if you meant, he's of that exact generation that we talked about, which is Loach, Lee, Frears, Ridley Scott. They're all exactly the same generation.
Yeah.
And I think Parker, because he was
Adrian Lyne, I would argue.
Adrian Lyne, but Parker, being a bit like Tony Scott, desperate to get to the US, is going to get there as soon as he can, wants to work in the American idiom, as Ridley Scott did, as both of the Scott brothers did, was always looked at slightly askance by the others, and was always happy to be ploughing his very commercial furrow, and didn't, the last person who would even read a review. I can't imagine he ever bothered about it.
I think the thing with Parker was he had this way of being very much his own propagandist, and he rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. I remember him attacking Merchant Ivory as being the Laura Ashley of cinema, and I just thought it's very unfair and very true at exactly the same time. And you just sort of think, well, you should play nice. That's not the sort of thing you do to the British film industry.
I mean, as Terence Davies, who we just mentioned, I mean, was another one who never bit his tongue.
Right.
And with due cause, the fact that Terence Davies didn't make a film for all of those years and finally got to make a film by entering a nano-budget film fund from Liverpool and made Time at the City, which put him back on the map. But Terence Davies was literally living in a trailer park in Scarborough for, several years. Yeah. Could barely pay rent, never mind get money for a film. Parker was doing it from a whole different sort of position. The world of advertising, all that. I saw his last film, which was The Life of David Gale.
Yeah, with Kevin Spacey and Kate Winslet. And it's a fairly dreadful film.
Yeah, it's one of those where you
There's
think...
that clock again.
Yeah, you look at that film and you think, let's hope that Parker squeezes the last one in here. Because if that's what he's bowing out on, then sadly he never got to make another one. But as I say, the critical rehabilitation of Alan Parker begins today. And
it's overdue.
Yeah, and next year's Critics' Choice is going to be critics only choosing their favourite Alan Parker film.
Yes,
so,
yes, I'm for that. You mentioned in passing Fame, but it's hard to overstate what a huge cultural phenomenon that was at the time. It spawned a TV series, it had a hit song.
It's a bit like MASH. People are aware of the film, or even Downton Abbey, which is just a TV version of Gosford Park. Yeah. And when you say, and the film version of Fame, there was the film version, wasn't it?
Which is a lot more depressing. More like
Saturday Night Fever, kind of.
Exactly.
The dark side of New
York.
Fame costs, and right here's where you start paying in sweat. As the saying goes. But yeah, Birdie is a hugely important film for many people.
Matthew Modine and Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. And so, as I say, it's a very strange filmography, and one which has great peaks and terrible troughs, which I think is sometimes it's fun to ride those undulations.
Absolutely,
and, when you get, with all respect to Hong Sang-soo and Wes Anderson and people like that, you know what you're going to get. You go and see their films, you know who's going to be in it, you know what the camera work's going to be like, you know how you will discuss it afterwards. And when Alan Parker was around, it was like, what have we got today,
People on the wall. Let's see what this is going to be like.
Yeah, it's one of those where you look through his filmography, he directed that, he did that as well, oh my God.
About that. The Road to Welver.
Did he do that one?
Yeah.
That must have been his penultimate one.
I think it was, and it's actually quite good. If that had been his ultimate, I would have said...
But it's like Cassavetes doing...
did he do a Prospero one at one?
No. The Cassavetes, everybody says that his last film is Love Streams.
Right.
Because his actual last film is Big Trouble, which was this, kind of knockabout comedy with, I think Peter Falk was in it, which again, people sort of charitably kind of say, well, that was one for the studio, because at the end of Love Streams, he literally dances off screen. Yeah. He literally tips his hat and dances off screen, and it's like, what an ending. Yeah, and then it's like, and then there's this other one,
It's a little bit like I always thought Frenzy was Hitchcock's last film, and then there's Family Plot. Yeah,
a lot of French people love Family Plot. I wish them well with that.
A lot of French people love a lot of stuff that we don't need to love.
It's like Truffaut with Vivement Dimanche. I like Vivement Dimanche a lot, and Family Plot and Vivement Dimanche are very similar in many ways. But, Truffaut sort of signed off with a kind of amusing trifle of a film, rather than a big statement. Altman, the last thing of Altman is Prairie Home Companion. And everybody says, the maestro, what a valedictory moment, and it ends with, his career begins with James Dean story, ends with literally with Lindsay Lohan. Altman had 3 films on the go when he died. This was definitely not intended as a farewell to the world, so there we are. It's the magic of cinema.
What a brilliant note to end on as well, because as we, I didn't plan to end on talking about endings, but there we go. That's the magic of writers on film.
This is what happens when you come to the Arctic. The magic just somehow comes from the Aurora Borealis. And as a great critic said, welcome to Tromsø, where the biggest screen is the sky.
I don't know who
sounds like a Bleesworth or somebody. One of those.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, John. Tack.
Oh, I wasn't recording. 1 hour, 3 minutes.
Wow.